Radnor Township Board of Health is called to order. Please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have the minutes of the last meeting. I should announce at this point that Alexa Lee, our Radnor Township School District intern with the Board of Health, is unable to be with us tonight. She has a lot of homework. So Kevin Kane, I hope you can do something about that. We're going to miss her. And I've asked Amy Wishner to help me with taking notes. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a couple of corrections. One is that under old business, where the Board of Health discussed the issue of Roundup, Mr. Hazen read a proposed resolution to the problem. I won't claim to have a solution to the problem, but that word should be resolution. And also, the conclusion of that item on the agenda should indicate that the resolution was tabled at that meeting. Was not voted on, but was tabled. Any other corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any contraries? Thank you. The minutes are approved as amended. Under announcements, two of the members of the Board of Health, Dr. Saldivar and Dr. Leader, were also unable to be with us this evening due to other commitments. Larry Taltone, the Township's health officer, is not here this evening, and our thoughts and prayers go out to him on the passing away of his mother. We're with you in spirit, Larry. Any other announcements? Ms. Burns.
Yes, I passed out to the board members that there's a hazardous household waste recycling drop-off that is set up for March 24th. I got this information from Representative Greg Vitale that it will be from 9 to 3 p.m. March 24th, rain or shine, at the Emergency Services Training Center, 1600 Calcone Hook Road in Sharon Hill. We will, if you probably go to Greg Vitale's webpage, you could probably get more information, but I have a copy, or the other thing is there's a phone number, 610-892-9620, to get more information about the event. Or Greg Vitale, one of the state representatives for the 166th Legislative District. But it's for the hazardous household waste recycling drop-off on March 24th.
Thank you. Any other announcements? I have one. As it says at the bottom of our agendas this evening, March is National Nutrition Month, and in the latest publication, health briefs from the National Association of Local Boards of Health, it indicates that in December 2011, the United States Department of Agriculture launched Super Tracker, which is a free website, a free web tool that assists individuals in reducing their risk of chronic disease and maintaining a healthy weight. And I've asked Mr. Doling to put that website, which is www.choosemyplate.gov up on the screen at this point. That website, according to the National Association, can help individuals make healthier food and physical activity choices for themselves, family, and children. So I would encourage all Radnor residents to access that site and look at the information that can potentially be a tool to inspire healthy living. This week, starting yesterday, March 18th through March 24th, is also National Poison Prevention Week, and that's a week that's particularly of a particular importance. I was a founder of the Philadelphia Poison Control Center, along with others, back in the 80s, and so that's an important week. And the poison prevention programs in the nation have been responsible for, among other things, the Poison Prevention Packaging Act in 1970, which promoted child-resistant packaging, and that has saved hundreds of lives every year. So that's an important week to observe. Thank you. Mr. Taltone's health officer's report is part of our packets, and since he isn't here to give it, I would encourage everyone to, every board member to read it. If there are any questions about that, we can probably bring them up. One last announcement is that the Board of Commissioners are meeting this evening, and I've been informed just a few minutes ago that we have to clear this room by 6 p.m. tonight. At this point, we'll move to old business. Under teen health issues, again, Dr. Leader and Ms. Lee are not here this evening. Amy Wishner has also been active on that, but I think it's enough for this evening. We have a busy agenda, and as I said, we have to be out of here by 6. So we'll just say that work on that is moving forward. I've been in touch with Mr. Kane, the representative from the Radnor Township School District, and it's possible that we may use the district's e-minders program as a way of getting some of that information out, as well as going forward together with a possible proposal to the Radnor Educational Foundation for funding for the posters that we've envisaged for that. Dr. Leader and Ms. Lee have put together a budget, and my understanding is that the total cost will not exceed $300. So that seems to me very doable. Any questions about that? Comments? Okay, Ms. Burns, you're up next on the deer management issue. You attended a program in the township on that.
Yes, the township had the United States Department of Agriculture do a survey of the deer population in our township, and then they made some recommendations based on the amount of deer in the population, the deer population within our township, of different ways of controlling the deer population. It's estimated that there's 101 deer per square mile, which is there's about 50% of increase per population in our area, and that there's a lot of deer for our township. They went through a list of activities that one does to control the deer population. There was a couple of years ago, the Board of Health looked at some goals, and part of our goals was looking at deer safety. And it was recommended at that time from the Board of Health looking at some of the activities that were brought up by the U.S. Department of Agriculture was, with the deer safety, was increased signage, and which would be so people would know where there's more deer activity, because there are places within this township that have high 16, 15, 18% of the deer population exists in certain areas of our community, and that we want to make sure that we have adequate signage for our, for making the roads safer, knowing when during different times, like in late November, during the rutting season, where there's increased activity, especially at dusk, where the deer would be out in the crossing the streets or in the streets more, maybe with increased lighting. That would be important to us as part of the Board of Health to increase the safety of our population that would be served. There's other issues that the township would be looking at, and they are going to be doing further studies on deer management, and they're going on. The township commissioner has given approval for for additional studies to go on with looking at other ways to manage the deer population.
Thank you. Any further comments on that?
I just want to ask a question. So you said there's a 50% increase of the deer population. That's since when?
Well, it's not like a 50, I'm sorry. It's basically, because of the number of deer per square mile, it's basically too many deer to support. We shouldn't have that many deer, so it's about 50% more deer than we should be having per square mile. If I understood what they were trying to say.
In addition to signage, I understand that, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that they will revisit perhaps the issue of better lighting on some of the roads so that at night the visibility will be improved. I should add that I've asked Ms. Doyle, who represents the Board of Health on the Environmental Advisory Council, to bring up the issue of deforestation caused by deer so that the EAC can look at that. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on. The next item, Alliance for Safe Kids, or ASK, is just an information item to remind people that the next program of the Alliance for Safe Kids is going to be here in this room on April 18th. I believe it's going to be starting at 7 or 7:30. But the subject matter is making a safe transition to college, which is an issue that concerns many parents and certainly many kids who are moving on to college and being on their own for the first times in their lives. So it's a safety issue as well as an academic issue. And the Board of Health, of course, is pleased to be a co-sponsor of that program. There was no EAC meeting this past month, so Ms. Doyle does not have a report.
Herb? So, and then there's a REACH meeting tomorrow night at Panera, right over wherever there, 7 p.m. Panera's going to donate 10% of the proceeds to something Radnor-y, I forget what, maybe to Project REACH anyway. And the topic is parties. Apparently there have been several parties lately where the police have been called. And so to talk about sort of things to watch out for, safety, policy, parental policies and how they should be set and enforced. So tomorrow, Tuesday, 7 p.m. at Panera.
And that location is on Lancaster Avenue, where there was an Acme that used to be in that location. So if you're familiar with where the Acme used to be, that's where that meeting is. Thank you. Any other items before we move on to the township use of the herbicide Roundup? Before we begin discussion, we have actually what qualifies for a Board of Health meeting, a throng of members of the public here with us this evening. How many of you are here to speak on that issue, given the fact that we don't have a lot of time? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands raised. That being the case, I do want to give everyone a chance to speak. I'm going to have to limit the time to approximately 3, certainly no more than 4 minutes per speaker, so that everyone does get a chance. But first, I'm going to ask Dr. Andrew Foreman who prepared a report. And by the way, I do want to express my thanks to those members of the public who forwarded articles to us through Mr. Taltone. That was much appreciated and gave us an opportunity to look at some additional literature on the subject. That, in fact, is the Dr. Andrew Foreman did a review of that literature, and that is the subject of his report, which he's going to give us a synopsis of. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And again, second my thanks to the public for presenting us with some new literature that we hadn't had before, and also just to remind the public that we're here to serve you. And I'm a member of the township. I walk my dog in the Radnor Trail, and I try my best, obviously, to keep my family safe. So I took the time, a considerable amount of time, to review the literature that was forwarded to Mr. Taltone. And I have a full report. If anybody wants a copy of it, I'm sure we'll be happy to either email it to them or have a copy available of everything that I went through. But I'll just go through some of the basics. A lot of information was presented, and I tried to tease out the articles that were published in peer-reviewed journals, and just try to determine if there was significant enough evidence to contradict what we had seen in prior weeks, in prior months rather, of the European Commission and the the FDA's approval or safety profile on Roundup and glyphosate in general. In addition to that, there were some questions about additional chemicals that are found in Roundup in addition to glyphosate, which include surfactants and some other what are called non-active chemicals to keep the Roundup, I assume, where it needs to be. And to sum it up, there were some scientific articles in peer-reviewed journals. Many of them were what are called in vitro studies, which means they were in laboratory dish with cells that showed that there were some concerns that Roundup does kill cells and does cause some changes in cells. There was not any articles that I could find in the literature that came from the concerned citizens that had large in vivo studies or live studies of animals or humans in exposure to those chemicals. There was one that was what's called a retrospective study, where people were interviewed about their exposure to glyphosate and products in a farming community, and then some data was obtained concerning their current health situations. So that would be, I guess, a live study of some kind with some limitations because of how the data was obtained. So That being said, I couldn't find too much in the literature that was really overturning all of the other information that we had been presented in the prior months. Again, each point is kind of, from the email, has been addressed in my letter, and like I said, we're happy to share that with anybody who wants to read on that. Two large pieces of information that came through were one from Greenpeace and one from a place called Earth Open Source. And just to address these large bodies that have had expressed concerns about glyphosate safety, I think it's fair to say that each of these groups has a pretty good agenda. Their agenda is to ban glyphosate and ban modified crops, which use a gene to keep the crops safe from glyphosate's use. And I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope in science when you start out with a certain idea and then you cherry pick data in order to fit your theory. So those two large pieces of information, Earth's open source packet about glyphosate and Greenpeace's packet about glyphosate, were obviously very one-sided and presented absolutely no evidence at all that the chemical is at all safe. Everything they cherry-picked out was that of its dangers. So I think that's a little bit of a skewed way to find the data. But I did go through as many of the sources that were presented to us as possible. Sorry to be long-winded. I do want to hear from people.
Thank you, Dr. Foreman. Let me indicate first that the resolution that was tabled at our last meeting, and I have additional copies here. Whoop, I had additional copies. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. If you can just put them on that table there, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. The resolution that was put forth last meeting for purposes of framing our discussion, as I indicated before, was tabled, so it is now once more before us. And just let me ask if there is any other comment from a member or members of the Board of Health. Okay, hearing none.
Herb, just one quick point. I think somebody from the township addressed the point that we are using the aquatic version of Roundup in areas that have runoff. Was that an email that I received at some point this week? Or they're using a form of Roundup that's safer for aquatic environments?
That's correct.
See, the only piece of, I think, literature that was significant for some amphibian damage in a live study showed that this aquatic version was a safer alternative to regular glyphosate, regular Roundup.
That is made clear in your report, too, that there's clear data from industry and private sources that Roundup should not be used near aquatic life, and runoff of these chemicals needs to be carefully monitored. So you did address that. At this point, there are people who wanted to speak on both sides of the room, so I'll turn to what's on my left here and ask for someone to come forth. And then we'll go to the right-hand side of the room and switch back and forth that way.
Good evening. My name is Ann Murphy. I'm the director of the Chester Ridley Crum Watersheds Association. And Radnor Township participates with us with 45 other municipalities with their stormwater education and outreach program. And part of that program is an annual pollution prevention training program, which the township employees participated in on March 7th, and that was for the landscaping industry, but it included a 1-hour component about the safe use of herbicide application. And also, as part of my experience, I've been working for 8 years with homeowners associations and municipalities maintain riparian buffers and wetlands where we've planted things and try to maintain them and use responsible use of pesticides. It is my understanding that, that an aquatic herbicide is being used, and I wanted to make the point that there is a big difference between like a Roundup, which is just a regular glyphosate product, and an aquatic herbicide like an Accord, and that is in their surfactant. Their surfactant is not as much as approved for aquatic life and is safe for aquatic life. And I have the material safety data sheet for Accord. And you can see by looking at the MSDS that it says cancer information did not cause cancer in laboratory animals. The material is practically non-toxic to aquatic organisms. I mean, let's put it this way. If you have to use something, and we're not saying that we advocate spraying the weeds on the gravel on the Radnor Trail, because I think that's an issue of tolerance of the residents. I mean, I was out there walking there yesterday, and there's little stuff growing on the gravel, and I think people don't have a problem with that. But if the weeds got to be 3 feet tall and they were prickly, I think that would become a nuisance for residents. So, but that putting aside, there may be other instances other than this specific spraying of the trail, like you have that wetland, that park on the corner of West Devon. We have knotweed coming in there. Basically, an aquatic herbicide is the only thing you can use to control that knotweed. So you either have to decide you're going to try to stop it from spreading, or you're going to do something responsible use of it. So that's one point I wanted to make. So it's certainly up to the, and we would recommend, therefore, I think the township is using an aquatic herbicide, but it's nothing that I ever heard of, so I would recommend they use something more well-known like an Accord. And then also, we would be happy, it's also, of course, has to be applied according to the guidelines and like the proper training which we had a couple weeks ago. And finally, we would be happy to provide alternatives to managing the landscape where there are alternatives to, such as the mulch. I mean, if you get weeds in the mulch, you can replace the mulch, and you can do other things. You could put newspaper under it. But there are certain circumstances where your only alternative is to use, and then we would recommend using the safest thing possible, which is this aquatic herbicide, such as an Accord. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to say two other things I wanted just to hand in. One is it says, why aquatic herbicides affect aquatic plants and not you? It's by Purdue University professor there. And also there's a pamphlet published by Nature Conservancy. It talks about Japanese knotweed, destroyer of watersheds, and it advocates using an aquatic glyphosate product for controlling Japanese knotweed. And I know they have been doing that along the Delaware. So I'll just hand these over.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
My name is Sarah Pilling, and I live in Garrett Hill, and I understand you're addressing this on the trail, but I want to address the use of Roundup products in our parks where our children are playing. 2 years ago, a group of us, about 8 or 10 of us, used to gather at Emlenton Field. At about 6 o'clock in the morning, we'd have coffee together and the dogs would play. And we began to notice that the grass was dying in a very strange pattern along the fence lines, but also under the bleachers where people sat and along the fencing that keeps the field separated from the people. And I called and found out it was Roundup. By that time, one of the dogs was really quite ill. And what really concerned us is we had a pregnant woman who was part of this group. So at that time, I asked the township and said, you should be pre-posting and you should be post-posting so that we would know what was going on. It was only someone with a very bright set of eyes who figured out there was a very strange pattern to this grass dying, and I think it's totally inappropriate where children are playing. It's not like the weeds over in the bushes. It was right where the children would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on this side of the room?
Good evening. My name is Josh Hilbert, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Radnor's Environmental Advisory Council. And I wanted to let you guys know and the public know that at our meeting coming up Thursday, and I don't know the date, what's the 23rd? 23rd, I guess. 22nd. We'll be addressing this issue as well, and we'll be restricting our discussion more to the ecological and environmental aspects of glyphosate and the surfactants that are associated with Roundup and similar products. So our meetings are also are posted online too. So if you're not able to attend in person, you can download and watch it online. I just wanted to make one quick point. We've been discussing which product we are using. I got a similar email to what you were discussing about what product we were using. I believe the one that I saw in this email was that the product is called Glyphosate 41. Okay, so this is a, we keep saying Roundup. Of course, that's a trade name. But it is a glyphosate containing product that has a different surfactant from the standard Roundup formulation. And of course, the glyphosate 41 is purported to be safe to aquatic habitats. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilbert. We'll go on this side of the room now.
This is the groom side on this side, and that's the...
I wanted to say that,
Yeah.
but I didn't know if everyone had my sense of humor.
Thanks for leaving the one-liners to us. So, my name's Fred Stein. I work with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and this issue was brought to our attention by several of our members that are Radnor citizens. But the Riverkeeper is a watershed organization focusing on the tributaries of the Delaware River too, so that the Darby and the Crum and all of the watersheds around the Ivans Creek are all part of that same watershed. If I could ask, just for everybody's benefit, what could you just share with us? What's the procedure? Your procedure now? You're opening it up. I know you chaired the resolution or tabled the resolution. Could you just explain what the procedure is now as you move forward? I know the EAC is meeting on Thursday.
Well, the Board of Health, by Township statute, is an advisory body to the Board of Commissioners. So therefore, the only decision we can come to is to pass a recommendation on to the Board of Commissioners for their consideration and ultimate action one way or the other. Either they will approve our recommendation or disapprove it or do something else entirely. With regard to the resolution, which has been tabled, something similar will happen. When at some point we will vote to either approve that resolution, disapprove it, or amend it, and then pass an amended version. So those are the possible outcomes.
Can you share with us, will you wait as the board, will the board wait until they hear the findings of the EAC as additional information coming? Because I'm sure there will be other public comment provided there also.
We may, but that's really up to my colleagues on the board, and we haven't yet come to that particular decision. Our concern is slightly different from, as you heard Mr. Hilbert mention, they're looking at the use of glyphosate from an ecological and environmental standpoint, and we are looking at it more narrowly from a public health standpoint. So, and again, given our statutory function as advisory to the Board of Commissioners, we can pass along a recommendation, and it would be up to the commissioners to then wait for any additional recommendations from the EAC or the Department of Parks and Recreation, the board of that Parks and Recreation, which is also a body that is involved in this discussion.
Okay, thank you. I would ask you then I would hope that because you're saying that you're looking at the health aspects and the EAC is looking at the environmental aspect. And exactly, that was exactly my point, that it's one of those topics that you really can't isolate out too much, because the environmental impact has an impact on the public health of the residents that use the park. And as I'm sure that you all received the information that the Delaware Riverkeeper had forwarded out. Did everyone have a chance to get that from Maya Van Rossum? A letter came out dated March 13th. And then a second one that was an informational sheet, a special look at the ubiquitous Roundup and herbicide containing glyphosate and the surfactant POEA. Did everyone get a copy of that? Oh, sorry. What's that? I think it's important, especially since you're being charged with looking at the incoming information. What's that? No.
Okay.
But there is a comprehensive list of questions. And our perspective, Riverkeeper's perspective, is yes, the impact on the invasive plants along the Radnor Trail, but it's also the need for Radnor Township and every township. And my township, Haddon Township, Camden County, does the exact same thing. You go along our fences next to our kids' sports fields, and there's a brown line where it's herbicide spraying, and the first thing that the kids are told when they come onto the soccer field, throw your stuff over by the fence and let's go play. And it's we're hoping that you're looking at dealing with an invasive plants problem and also weed control, but it has to be done in a more holistic approach. And just using the herbicide is one part of a bigger picture. And there's a comprehensive list there that we took from the research that we did, and it's asking a whole host of questions. But it starts out with let's look at the entire picture of Radnor Township. What all is being sprayed throughout the community? Your high school has an integrated pest management program that's very comprehensive, that looks at pre or advanced notice and not spraying, integrated pest management programs. And on your webpage is very good and comprehensive, talking about the Radnor Green and talking about how important protecting the environment is. And I think that before a recommendation comes from this board, which of course your commissioners are going to look at as one of the authorities for the public health of the town, that we have to first start and answer those questions. And I'm sure you would come up with some additional ones on your own, but I think that it'd be a good place to start. And with me today is John Neistat, a Riverkeeper staff employee, is a licensed landscape architect, but he has a years of this kind of dealing with it on a municipal-wide basis, and is offering an opportunity that he could come and meet with the appropriate people in the township, and he can speak for himself. He'll get up in just a minute, but that's all I really wanted to share.
Thank you very much, sir.
One last question. Actually, I lied. It's one last question. Your report is going to be you're offering it made to the public, so I'd like to just make sure that we all have a chance, the public has a chance to review that, provide comment, and get a better understanding of your perspective of the literature, the peer-reviewed literature, before any decision is being made by this board, because that's important information.
I can promise that whoever fills out this sheet with an email address, Dr. Foreman will be very assiduous in following up. I can't promise that we're going to be given the luxury of time by the township commissioners to drag this process on too much longer.
No, I understand.
Okay.
You don't want to make it a 2013 agenda item, but not tonight.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm sorry, we do have to move along. We'll move to this. Did you say this is the groom's side or the bride's side? We'll move to the other side of the room now. Anyone else from that side who wishes to speak?
I'm Marv Meyer. I live at 10 Longwood Drive. I'm a retired biology prof from Eastern University, and I enjoy bird watching. So I went over to West Wayne Preserve last summer, and that part next to South Devon Road is just completely infested with poison ivy. And that's why I'm here, to make sure that whatever proposal gets passed, that from my experience, the only way to get rid of poison ivy is by some kind of spraying, like Roundup or something, and make sure we're able to do that.
Thank you for that input.
Hi, my name's John Neisted with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and I'm a restoration specialist and landscape architect. And the information that's come out is wonderful. What I'm trying to provide tonight, and the letter was sent, was how restoration needs to be done in a holistic approach, where instead of just using Roundup for spray and leave it, sometimes there are much more organic methods, hand control methods, which can reduce the use of the herbicides in the environment, which the studies show both sides of the story. To me, it's pretty clear that the less herbicide you use, the better. So there's so many different methods to reduce it. Even Japanese knotweed, which is known to need 2 years of spraying. I personally have dug it out, and with yearly work on it, Japanese knotweed, even the worst, one of the worst ones, can be done by hand. So lots of times it's a matter of trying to save the township money. It's quicker to spray than to come back and weed whack 5 times in the summer. So there are approaches. So the suggestion is to look at it as a holistic approach, and I'll just hand over this letter. Just in case you could let us know if that email didn't get through, and it describes the process of invasive plant management includes mapping and different methods of control, and then monitoring. So, and I'd be happy to come along and give advice, walk the trail. Each species is important on how you manage it. And I wanted to also mention that the habitat restoration is very important of native plants. So spraying something, there might be natives in there. So it's important to be able to identify what the native plants are.
Thank you for that, and I would encourage you also to give us an email address, because I want to point out that part of our resolution, which was introduced and tabled at the last meeting, closes, well, the resolution actually closes by saying that the township investigate the efficacy of other natural substances and use such in lieu of Roundup where practical to achieve desired herbicidal results.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
So I gather you have some knowledge about what those other substances might be.
Yes, substances and just effort sometimes. Yes. Thank you.
On to my left. Anybody else on that side of the room who is here to speak? Hearing none, I'll move to my right. Anyone? Okay.
Herb, can I address one more thing? So
Please.
I did get this letter, and I apologize that I didn't recognize it until I just read through it here. I didn't respond to this one specifically. There was another email that came from Mr. Tautone that had a number of articles that were sent to me, so I didn't respond to each point on this one. The middle paragraph on the second page is somewhat addressed in the article, so in my response rather, so the email should address that one. And that was, I think, what really the Board of Health was asked to do, was to say, is this a safe product for humans and our animals as far as the current data goes? And the last time we had the meeting, we went through the 2 articles that we had been presented before, and I hope that people don't think they were just 2 studies. They were not 2 studies. These were 2 large review articles, and I addressed that in my response to everyone. These were not 3 or 4 or 5. These were, in some cases, hundreds of articles over many years that were reviewed by this scientific study in a peer-reviewed journal. So that's addressed in my letter as well.
Yeah, Herb, I would like to make an additional comment, and that is that everybody here on the board has been looking at material for the past couple months. And so we're all taking on this responsibility.
Say one more, less than a minute.
Please.
Again, this, Fred Stein, again, this is, the spraying the herbicide is only part of the larger picture, and I haven't seen the resolution that was tabled, but it's, yeah, it was picked up. I think it was given back to you, actually, maybe not. But the fact that it, just knowing, you said it was to the greatest extent practicable, and we're dealing with issues, everything from stormwater to brownfields cleanup, and all the legal language is all riddled with to the greatest extent practicable, and that really is a big loophole. And the moving the importance of studying the problem holistically, invasive plants management and weed control around public places has to be looked at not just where is it safe to put herbicide, and is that herbicide safe for that spot? It has to be looked at. Well, that's okay to start, but then as soon as that's sprayed and that's taken effect, what are we going to put in the place of that? If we don't put something in the place of that, like native plant species, or maybe we don't put the herbicide down, but we weed whack. Maybe there's, we weed whack and then we come in with native plants. We're working in a 25-acre, relatively small parcel of land in Camden County, and that's exactly what we've done. Where we've sprayed, we had to spray, but we put plastic bags over the natives. They sprayed. It was labor intensive. Then we took the bags off, and then we went back in there with native plants. And again, it's a little bit more labor intensive, but we're all what I feel is we're all in the same ship together. And if we can reduce the amount of chemicals that we put in there or put on the ground, even if it's a near water safe category, we should do that.
Thank you, Mr. Stein.
Herb, I just want to mention, I think the first speaker, I believe you picked up all the copies of the, oh, okay.
Before we move to the question, I would ask Mr. Fisher, who is representing the Township Commissioners, if you don't have anything to add at this point.
Yeah, no comment at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a sense, given that it was the commissioners who charged the three bodies with coming up with some recommendations, what timeline do the commissioners have in mind?
I don't know if we have a timeline. I think, we'd like this to run its course through the committees and get, a good response from each of you. And, if that takes 2 months or 3 months, whatever it takes, I think is worthwhile waiting.
Okay, that pretty much expresses my own sentiments, and I know that there may be others on the board with contrary sentiments. My feeling, my thought is at this point that it would be better from the commissioner's point of view if they received a set of recommendations from all three bodies, Parks and Recreation, the EAC, and the Board of Health, that we would at least try to make consonant with each other before moving forward. I also feel that it would be a good idea to try to digest some of the additional material we've received tonight, but that's just one person's thought, and I'd be interested in hearing if anyone else has a different opinion or supports that opinion.
I agree totally with you, Herb. I think that, I'd like to hear everybody's input and hear what people have to say. I think that the volume of science that we've seen is sufficient to make a decision, but I think that it has to be comfortable for the public that they've had their voices heard, and also that they can see what our response was to some of the things they've given us. So I think there's no rush in getting the draft proposed, in my opinion. Again, in my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think it'll be important to hear what the EAC recommends, and I'm not sure if we've heard anything from Parks and Recs.
Not directly, but they have been kept in the loop, and my guess is that they will defer to what the EAC and the Board of Health recommend.
Herb, as I
Humphrey.
recall, I think that when we first had this broached in January, I believe, there was some discussion about having a joint communique from both the Board of Health and the EAC, or at least dovetailing everything in at the same time to the commissioners. I did want to make one other comment here, and it's a sort of a collateral one, and I think it was in the report that I sent at the meeting I couldn't attend, but if you don't mind me mentioning that. In our township's health officers' monthly reports, the Board of Health occasionally hears of disputes that are resolved between neighbors over weeds. And this is because the township has a weed ordinance. And weeds can be a health issue because they hide vermin, they hide all sorts of other things. Weeds are defined usually as all grasses or annual plants that are noxious, etc. But we do have this ordinance on file. And it's a Radnor Township Code, Chapter 222, Section 302.4. And it talks about weeds that are growing over 12 inches high, not garden plants, but these are weeds, noxious weeds. And I think that many of us can drive throughout the township and see not just private property or personal property. We can see institutions, educational institutions, commercial institutions. And you drive by the roads and you've got vines growing up in the property as large as a man's forearm. Now, these can be cut, they can be taken down, but they're a continual source of weeds for everybody in this community. So I only mention that as a plea, as a beginning, that we try to enforce the weed ordinance in this community. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Just let me just add one thing. I believe the issue was first brought to our attention at our meeting in November. But we were not at that point charged with doing anything, so it just lay there actually until January when Commissioner Nagel, who was here at that meeting, and you're correct, that was when we were first charged with making some recommendations back to the commissioners. Amy, do you have?
I guess just the only thing I want to add is that, I don't see our role as either telling the township how to manage the weed problem. So in that sense, I appreciate all these ideas about how you can control weeds, and of course, optimally, wouldn't we all like for everything to be pulled by hand, and that would be the way, of course, just like we would all just as soon not have AstroTurf fields, we would all love to have grass, but when you need fields used, by gym, by school, by after-school sports, by, sometimes you have to, go with the choice that maybe isn't your first choice. But, so I guess that's one thing, is that, I don't see it as my role to tell the township how to manage the weeds. There are people who are paid to do that. And secondly, I don't see my role as being the Federal Department of Agriculture. And, I think my perspective is more, is in the literature, is there something that says this is so dangerous that we should say don't use it? So I'm looking at it in that kind of, because to me that's manageable. Saying I should be the one to read every bit of the original studies, the original research, and decide is a product safe enough to be used, or to decide what is the best way to manage weeds, and that I'm supposed to be, up to someone like, a landscape architect who you do this for years, this is your profession. The township has paid staff to make those kinds of decisions. So to me, as I said, I think is is there something, is this so unsafe it should be banned? Is to me what we were really asked to look at. So, anyway, that's my perspective.
Thank you. Let me ask if there are any further comments on this side of the room. We're coming up on 2 minutes of 6, and we do have to vacate this room. And I need to ask before anyone else talks about the Roundup issue, because we have the public comment section of the meeting. Is there anyone here who had another matter to bring to us? Because I want to make sure that anyone who showed up for another matter is heard. Okay, hearing none, then, ma'am, one last comment. You'll have the last word.
I hear you saying that you should not be telling the township how to weed, but I think at a very minimum, you have it within your power that the township should pre-post and post-post when they're going to spray. And that is the very minimum that they could and really should do.
Thank you again for that comment. I believe, without putting it to a vote, that we have a consensus to defer action on the resolution for at least one more meeting. With that, it's just about 6 o'clock, actually a minute before, but we'll adjourn the meeting then. Thank you all for coming, and your valuable input is great. Thank you.